Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about complexity. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, why do you think, why does it seem that learning programming starts off so simple and then it comes to real applications and it amps up in difficulty so fast? I feel like instead of understanding what I'm doing, I'm starting to copy paste and hoping it works. Well, because usually when you're going to learn anything, it starts out simple. And I like to say that the world is only simple to simple people. Because the reality is that the world is enormously complicated. It's in fact, depending on how philosophical you want to get, it's so complicated that no human knows what's going on, even if we like to tell people that we sort of know, and like we have these books and scrolls and other like this crystals and stuff that are telling us things that we don't really understand. Fundamentally, nobody really knows, depending, as I said, on how you look at it. And that is not because it cannot be understood. It is that the reality of the situation is that you are only able to perceive parts of the problem in the beginning, and the older you and wiser you get, the broader your perspective on what could possibly be going on or what could possibly be happening increases. And so you expand your mind, if that makes sense. And the same thing happens here in software, where in order for us to teach you programming, we need to take it kind of like when you're riding a bicycle. At first you get these support wheels, something very simple. Just we simplify the problem to the lowest level, just so that you can get the courage to just sit on the saddle. Even if that's just like a beginner level thing and it's not something that's going to be the end state, we need to give you something. We're learning how to read. You teach kids their ABCs first, and that's hard when you're at that stage. But once you've memorized the sequence, well, then you're ready to take and like morph it into words, and that's going to be hard, and so forth and so forth. But then you can take it to its extreme, and imagine, guys, even if you're a proficient user of your own language, you probably don't know all the words in your own language. And if you work in, say, law or something like that, you're going to find that there's a lot of rules for writing stuff, or if you're an author or something like that, especially if you work on like dictionaries and stuff like that, where the definition of the word, I can only imagine, like there are different levels of writing, and anybody who's done any serious writing will tell you that the average person, like a standard person, you know nothing of how much more there is to know about your language and how to use it properly, and like authorship and so forth and so forth. And the reason is, as I said, because you simply are not required to face off against challenges that are at a higher level in the beginning, because at the beginning there's nobody who wants you to make them something. So we give you these toy tutorials to just play around with, so you can get sort of the basic concepts. But the reality is that when you feel like things are getting complicated, depending on your problem, right? That is the real problem. That's when your reality hits you. This is the sort of stuff that real professional software developers are dealing with every single day. And the thing that I want you to understand, on the other hand, is that everybody feels that way in the beginning, just as when we were talking about riding the bicycle, right? Everybody starts out not being able to ride so well. And then you practice a little bit and you learn how to ride good enough so that you can take off the support wheels. And it's the same thing here. So you very quickly realize that even with software, there's a learning curve. And if you get to the point where you're copy pasting things, well, ideally you shouldn't do that, but then you've reached the next step of your personal development, and you need to spin your wheels a little bit on that part until you don't need to copy paste anymore, because it's really down to repetition and comprehension. Because if you repeat and you reflect and you try to learn the thing and you just fail and fail and fail, and just like with a bicycle, you might fall off 100 times before you can ride it for more than a minute or two. You just keep on doing that process, and then you'll realize that, hey, this is a fairly simple problem, or like, yeah, no, I sort of understand what's going on now, and then you go on to the next thing and you hit the next wall. And that's why the professional software developers, they are at that stage. They're so good at software development that most of the really complicated problems that are happening in like real applications or the standard web stuff that most of us do doesn't feel all that. It's not a problem because you've done it so many times and usually over years, so you don't really have an issue with it. But even for us, or like for programmers like that, you have areas where the average software developer has no idea how to solve that problem. Some problems are so complicated that, well, now it's our turn to just continue that journey, and that is like lifelong learning. And that's why I always try to tell people you should be damn humble, because just because you become a master of a section, like a part of whatever you're doing, which is usually the case, there's really not that many people who know everything about everything. You should remember that you can be a master programmer, and all it takes is for you to get a problem where you need to, say, work with accessibility, and all of a sudden you are like an amateur in comparison to someone who knows nothing about software development but is a decent QA, for example. So what I want you to take away from this is that the reason why the learning seems to just ramp up the further you go, and usually does so very quickly, is because everything you see on tutorials it's a toy. Because real software, like real code that you're using in production, is usually so complicated that no human would ever want to learn programming if you saw that immediately. It's the same thing with reading. How many kids do you think would be illiterate if the first thing they're going to have to read is the law book? So realize that you're basically a child when you learn to program for the first time. You're learning the basics of the basics. It's the ABCs. And before you're ever going to get a real job, usually, you're going to have to learn how to read at a professional, at a proficient level. And as you can imagine, if you think about that a little bit, that analogy, it took you quite a long time, I suspect, to get to a point where you could read. And you can bet on that being a good software developer is roughly the same sort of journey. Have a great day.